Well, I missed Fury Road here in premiere, and I missed 3,000 Years of Longing, and I couldn't miss this one. Yes, you know, and I'm based out of Amsterdam right now.
Oh, right.
Yeah. What? Oh, sorry.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our panel on film music promotion. I'm incredibly honored to introduce to you our guests of honor today. To my left, Ray Costa from Costa Communications, composers Tom Holkenborg and Simon Franklin, and Wim de Witte from Ghent Film Festival and the World Soundtrack Awards. We have another guest, mystery guest, who couldn't be here in person today, but we will have a look at the pre-recorded interview that we had with him. His name is Rocco Corazzo from Water Tower Music, which is Warner Brothers in-house label. He's head of marketing, and he's going to explain us a little bit how he works and how he promotes film scores within Water Tower Music.
Hello, my name is Valerie. We're incredibly honored to have you participating to this panel on film music promotion. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. My name is Rocco Carrozza. I'm the VP of Marketing at Water Tower Music, and I'm really happy to be here as part of this panel at Marché du Film Festival.
Could you explain how the promotion of the music can contribute to the overall success of a film campaign? And meaning by that from the soundtrack release to awards campaigning, from the original songs, but also the score?
Yeah, great question. So music from a film, it really helps set the scene and bring out a specific feeling that filmmakers want the audience to have. So in a sense, it taps into people's emotions, right? And at Water Tower, our job is really to help and encourage people to relive those experiences. So, for example, in Dune Part 2, when Paul and Chani kiss during the sunset on the top of a sand dune with Hans Zimmer's sweeping score, or when Barbie has that flashback moment to Billie Eilish's song, What Was I Made For? And even in Furiosa, Tom Holkenborg's score mixed with like car and motorcycle engines and heavy drums that just fuel your adrenaline. These are all incredible moments that people want to relive over and over. So we want them to relive them and to use the music in social media, put them up, put them into personal playlists. Actually, another example is Wonka, which came out last December. It's filled with incredible songs and score, and the people that saw it, they love those songs. So we pulled scenes out of it. We created sing-along music videos. So things like that help take that film experience beyond the theatrical window and into everyday life. And it just really helps extend. So I think that's probably a good example of how we just take something throughout the entire film campaign.
So how does Water Tower Music, as Warner Brothers in-house record label, contributes to the overall PR campaign of the film?
Us at Water Tower, we're a part of the marketing conversation from the very start of a film campaign. So we start ideating with marketing, with PR, consumer products, exhibitor relations, and also our composers. So we're having conversation months and months in advance of a film being released on how the music can actually help amplify really any and all of the aspects of a film campaign. On Furiosa, for instance, we put out a single early just a few weeks ago. We did a press release very specific to that, which of course calls out the film and the release date of the film and the release date of the full soundtrack album. And then we worked with all the internal teams to ensure that they have music available to use in social campaigns, to use at screenings, to use at Cannes, for example, all of which ahead of the full soundtrack release. And then we're getting that single also marketed at music outlets like Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and we're tapping into essentially a lot of times a different audience than the typical theatrical team is tapping into. So we're tapping into the music audience. We're trying to help bring in more more folks into the theater and to help shine a light on really any upcoming feature film that we're working on.
So thank you, Rocco. It's an incredibly interesting and nice model to have a studio distributor and in-house label. Maybe Tom, with your very recent experience on Furiosa, the album came out today, a soundtrack album, film premiered just a couple of days ago here at the festival. Could you elaborate a little bit on what Rocco mentioned on promoting the film score as part of the overall campaign of the film?
Yes. For me, the situation is slightly different than maybe for some other composers, because I had an artist career before I got into film scoring, and I still have a lot of fans from that time period that are interested in the music that I make today. And then I primarily work on movies that have a strong presence in pop culture. Movies like Deadpool, but also Mad Max, also the Justice League, Snyder Cut, Batman versus Superman, and then especially for those type of movies, like the music starts to live outside of the film, and it gets its own merit to exist, and especially with these. Properties like the DC films and Mad Max and Furiosa, like people really want to hear, like, okay, what is going to be the new theme for this character or that character? So I think it's very important, and there's lots of opportunities to push that even way more in the future, and so. At this point, music is being marketed in the traditional way. We release a single, we post something on social media, and it gets a premiere with a magazine or something like that. But to me, that is kind of like the marketing that we already did in the 1980s, you know, when I signed my first record contract. And with all the technical developments that we have nowadays, there's so many ideas to push this forward. I'll give you a few examples. I would love to release like almost like the individual sounds that became the score of Furiosa. So hobbyists and musicians themselves can experiment at home to create their own version of the score, or release like a Furiosa app where very creatively you can play with the scenes and play with the music, and actually a very interactive way of doing it, or create, binaural experience of the score that you can walk through your house with VR glasses and a headset, and the music changes as you walk from one side of the room to the other side of the room. And these are things that especially young people are so incredibly into, but at this point, nothing in the marketing side is tapping into that. And that probably has a reason. And the main reason is, before a movie gets released, you're not going to know whether the movie is successful. And so before you start spending a gazillion amount of money on doing that, you first want to know if the movie is successful. Unfortunately, when the movie is successful, it never gets done afterwards.
Yeah, right. Ray, you've also worked on many of the Warner campaigns. Most recently also Barbie, June, Mad Max. Is there anything you would like to add to what Rocco and Tom mentioned already?
Well,
I think so.
Testing, yeah, sorry. It's funny, I've been honored to work with Tom on a couple of other projects prior to this, and he's a musical genius. Besides being a composer, he's also so involved in the sound that he has a recording mixer credit on this film, where he's been involved with that aspect of the audio for years. So I look at different angles for press as well, and one of his we were talking about is more, we want to have more conversations, public conversations with the sound team, and Tom talking about how they collaborated and how so much of the score is influenced by the sound, and so much of the sound is influenced by the score and the manipulation you do and all that. So that's some of the aspects of it. And so I'm brought on a lot of times early by studios or by composers, and also leaning towards Oscar campaigns who were very successful in helping people. You know, I was fortunate to work Billie Eilish for Barbie, and I also worked Mark Ronson and several other people, and I've done campaigns with Simon on Avatar: Way of Water, and it's always finding something unique and interesting, and working closely with a marketing team and how to think outside of the traditional box and make these people well known in the community and help get people to listen to the music outside, and in turn then promoting the project.
We'll get more into detail about awards campaigning, but I first wanted to touch upon, I know it's not maybe the most original way of promoting a score, but we also have a behind the score video, which you have for various projects, Tom, that we would like to show, because I think there's an entire audience interested in the creative process behind a score, and that's one of the ways to reach that audience.
Blood.
By the time I was 2, 3, I started playing instruments that were laying around the house. I got my first record deal in the latter half of the 80s, and then another one in the 90s. Then in 94, 95, I started Junkie XL. I toured extensively over the world, released a couple of records, got a Grammy nomination, had a #1 hit in 34 countries. And then I decided to come to LA to pursue a career in film composing from the ground up. Philly's Mad Max soundtrack. I would describe it as an over-the-top rock opera. It has all the elements of rock opera. It's got choir, it gets very dramatic at times, very loud, and then very small and very intimate, and then very loud, and then very dark. The approach on Mad Max was a lot of thinking, actually. We're talking about a war tribe. We're talking about tremendous human suffering. We're talking about a really interesting sense of humor that is throughout the whole film. And we're talking women that take control over the situation. All these characters are so wonderful, and it's so colorful, and it's so brutal. It's such a society where everything is completely out of control. So obviously, a flute and a harpsichord is not going to do you any good on a movie like this. So you got to come up with a whole concept with what the sound of this movie is. My music is very multi-layered, and it has a lot of depth in sound design, but also in harmony to make it work. So with Mad Max, I wanted to emphasize the fact that all these people are chasing each other in cars, like really rough metal, rusty metal. And I wanted to make sure that the drive, the aggression, but also the humanity was coming through in the score. My approach to film scoring is a mix to what is old school and what is new school. What's really new school is the really brutal mixing approach of making it aggressive, almost like a metal band. But then I'm old school in the thought process of like people need specific themes. Tom Hardy's theme is a low cello that plays 1 note or 2 notes or 3 notes, because he is this uncontrolled animal that could explode any moment and could turn into a real threat and a real danger. Whereas Furiosa is a really strong woman and very hardcore, up to the point where she thinks she found her homeland. That's where her melodic theme really comes in, and that develops throughout the film. So she has a very emotional theme, actually. The collaboration between me and George was really amazing. His sense for what a movie needs musically goes beyond what I had experienced. His approach on this was very, very refreshing, and it's something you can't read in a book. You just have to go through that experience with a director like that. It took a long time. We worked on it for 18 months. It was a very intense project to work on, but one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had.
Great. I think both of you also have experience with smaller indie films. Can you make like a small comparison between how the music is being promoted for a film within Warner structure, for instance, and then another, an entirely different film?
Me? I'm trying to think. The thing about unlimited funds and unlimited budgets is also that you have the massive limitations of the organization that is behind the unlimited funds and unlimited budgets. And also the fact that, for instance, on Avatar, not a frame is allowed to come out before the release. One of the things you can do on a smaller project is you can start to feed things earlier, you can start to do marketing so that you allow people to feel something where you can, and this is where the fact that we now have access to online systems for very little money, you can now seed those things out early in a way that you can't. Now, what happens when we're working with Disney or with Warner's or whatever is that there is this control. Now, I'm hoping that on Avatar 3 that I will get, since we now know what Avatar 2 looked like, one of the big problems was that, you know, Jim didn't want to have anything come out in advance. So December the 12th, I think, is the first time anybody could hear anything. And we had music ready months, you know, I'd been working on that for years, but that's not the point. The point is you need that surprise with Max as well. You need to have that sudden impact that happens on a global basis. And that's the difference. On a small film, you can make a huge difference by seeding things early on and by allowing the audience to start to interact. Because it's interesting, on the Avatar score, I think I'm like 700 million streams of this score. So there are people who desperately want to listen to music that is behind a film. And it acts so much as the heartbeat for what is going under. We're this emotional undercurrent that runs throughout the film. And that's true whether you've got $1,000 or $100 million. It makes no difference. That heartbeat approach, which was what we have to do as musicians, is the same. And the fact that you can now put things out on Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal and actually allow people to listen to things and also give them, as Tom was saying, we can give access to elements of our score in a way that for small movies, that's something that is a much more guerrilla way of working. And I think it really can be really useful and really people who have less budgets can make so much more of the music because the music provides this connection. And people forget sometimes how much of a connection that can be.
But I also mean outside of a financial structure, for instance, do you have the idea that for a smaller indie film, you're as much supported? When you describe like releasing a track in advance, that's really coming from you, I assume. It's not that.
I suspect that what happens is that when we're dealing on smaller films, the music, we have much more control. Not only that, we have much more responsibility in terms of handling things because they're often, these are people, they're so busy just trying to get the film finished, get the film out. The fact that we can support them by giving them extra musical input in terms of marketing it through the access that we have, that's something that you can approach on a micro budget film as much as you can on a mega budget.
Yeah, for sure. When going back to Warner, Barbie, it reminds me of awards campaigning, obviously, Ray, which you know very well. Is there any, for instance, when we talk about original songs, would you say, yeah, it obviously helps promoting the film. Can you give a little insight on, for instance, Barbie, on how that was approached by Warner, but also by the label?
Yeah. Okay. So even before Barbie, I want to go back to something. Back in the 60s and 70s, studios, months before the movie came out, would release a song. Like for all the Bond movies, the song Goldfinger would come out, a month or two before the movie, and that would get people excited about it. And Moon River for Breakfast at Tiffany's. What's that? All right, I'll talk this. Can you hear me now? All right, I'll put it right here. All right, so as I was saying, a month or two before the movie would come out, Moon River would be released for Breakfast at Tiffany's, for Bond movies, and that was the standard. And then for a little while, it wasn't as much, or all the studios got so caught up on doing it at exactly the same time. But the opposite could happen too. I was working a little song called "Can't Stop the Feeling" with Justin Timberlake and Max Martin, and that song came out almost 6 months before the movie came out. And then the narrative had to be reminding people it's for the movie Smurfs. We had to just really push that in because we wanted to let people keep that in people's mind. So that's one thing, in terms of an awards campaign, you always have to consider that. And then as part of the marketing of the Barbie movie, the biggest thing was it wasn't the Billie Eilish song to market it. It was the Dua Lipa song. Yeah. The dance song was the one that got people excited to see the movie, and that was it. That was the one, the Billie Eilish song, the first time you'd hear it, you cried. It was just, such a beautiful, heartwarming song. And then the same way with when the movie was coming out, the Ken song. So it was, that was the impetus of it for Barbie. And the same way that the Billie Eilish song was promoted as the heart of the film. And that was the president of the Cannes Film Festival this year, the director of the film. She wanted that song to be the heart of the film, and it was perfectly written for that. So I don't know, what was the question? Did I get to it? Sorry.
No, could you say or elaborate on how music-related awards, Oscars, but also World Soundtrack Awards, Hollywood and Music, how they can contribute to the overall PR campaign of the film?
So I've learned through the years to treat awards campaigns like presidential campaigns. Like, I'm a campaign manager is kind of what my job is. And there's these smaller awards and festivals that have awards that have songs and scores as categories. And so we work with the Golden Globes. We work on making sure everything qualifies there, and I have a relationship with all those members. And also there's the Hollywood Music and Media Awards, which is a smaller award show, but it's in November before any of the other award shows, and they have categories for Best Dramatic Score, Best Song. Both of them have won Hollywood Music and Media Awards, and then that sets the stage for the World Soundtrack Awards, and also for the Society of Composers and Lyricists, which is the nearest thing that composers have to a guild, and it's also, all this stuff is getting in front of the voters. So it's very specific because all the people who follow those awards are also members of the music branch of the Academy. So it's gearing towards things on a very basic level. These are the voters. These are the constituents. So. And so it's very important to get out to them and then use that to propel more of the media buzz to the trade press and all that. So yeah, that's a very important element of it.
Is there anything you can share about the music branch of the Oscars or Grammys, PR related?
Well, in terms of the music branch, in their wisdom, every few years changes rules. I was working with Diane Warren and Lady Gaga on a song "Till It Happens to You" from this movie, The Hunting Ground. It was an incredibly touching documentary about sexual assault on colleges, and we'd have a screening, and after the screening, at the reception, Gaga would walk and introduce herself to everybody in the room, and then there'd be a piano, and she'd sit at the piano, and she'd sing and play the song "Till It Happens to You." It was a beautiful performance. And kept doing that. And then it got nominated. It didn't win. It lost to a Bond song, which isn't a great Bond song. But the Academy then changed the rules and said, you're not allowed to have a live performance after, in connection with a screening or a reception. So I work with the SCL, and I help the SCL start the SCL Awards. Oh, and also if you're a member of the music branch, you're not allowed to contact other members of the music branch and say, you know, Tom can't say to Simon, hey, you know, I hope you could support my movie this year. You know, I'd like to be considered for best score. That's not allowed. So that's helpful for me because I can do that. But that's why the Society of Composers and Lyricists, when they were started, I also helped them make the rules. One of the rules, you can talk to other people in the branch and tell them about your song and score. Guess what? We can have concerts. And I also consult for Deadline, and they do a sound and screen concert for Emmys and Oscars. And then to make sure we didn't break any rules, because if you're a member of the SCL, you can also go to these concerts, and you're not breaking a rule because you're also a member of the Academy. But so with the Deadline, I said, okay, we're going to get the SCL as sponsors. We're going to get ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, the PROs, to say some of the United States, to all be sponsors also. So everybody who's a composer or songwriter is a member of that. So the Academy has to throw their hands up. So they all come to the event. So this is how we get around, because you know, it's great that for people to, you know, Ludwig Göransson did an amazing score for Oppenheimer, and then they had a concert live to picture. Daniel Pemberton, who did Spider-Man Spider-Verse, amazing concert of that, and that was at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, you know, and that helps get nominations too. So
that was what I was going to.
Sorry.
No, really, it's really nice. Outside of the classic PR assets, but also the entire awards campaigning, etc. There's an entire community out there, I think, about for film music that lots of more film-focused related professionals might underestimate. I think you can both probably relate. Tom has lots of incredibly nice educational videos as well. We already saw the behind-the-scenes video. Wim organizes each year an entire series of concerts where Simon will be one of the central guests in October next year.
Yeah, one of the guests, yes. He won the Discovery Award last year at the World Soundtrack Awards, and so we have this tradition that the Discovery Award of the previous year will come back the next year.
And, yeah, sorry.
But I think there's another thing, which is that much as composers support composers, and we do, because the one thing is we all live in our little rooms on our own. We never see anybody else. And then everything's like the World Soundtrack Awards and the SCL and so on is the only time that we actually, it's like, you know, lemmings go over a cliff and we come down and we fall into this pit together and complain about everything that we've been through for the previous year. But we are very isolated in our small little worlds because writing is a relatively solitary business. You sit down either with a pencil, a keyboard, or a guitar, whatever you're playing, and then you sit there and you fall in love with the image on the screen. And suddenly these awards and so on, at one time we get to home and see other people who are as dysfunctional as we are. But the thing, I would say there's another thing, which is to forget about the enthusiasts and the fans and the actual people in the wider public who are an essential part of this as well. Now, if you're unlucky, for instance, and your film releases the day before the BAFTA Awards are closed, then you can't do that, and that's one of those things that happens. So the timing of your score is also an essential part of the awards thing, is how you feed earlier on, and you can hope that if you're lucky enough, you can start to see the ground and allow those things to build up and so on. But I think Tom, you know, obviously has been doing his educational videos. I always go out to do master classes at colleges and conservatories around the world. And I think that's an essential part of what we do. But it's also about the fact that music is, you can take film music and separate it from the film and listen to it in its own right. And the idea is that and the songs then bring you back to that memory. Now, I've been involved in, you know, I used to do records before I was a composer, and I've been involved in film songs a long time. And that idea of a song being there as this memory trigger, is something that I think is something that the film companies always desperately hope for. I don't know if you have a song on the end of Max, but for Way of Water, I did a song with The Weeknd and Swedish House Mafia, and that was again something to bring something that it felt right for me to write a song with them on that. You look for those collaborations where you think it's going to enhance your film, and of course the film company is sitting there wondering if the marketing is going to help, and that's an essential part of it. But ultimately we're just trying to make something that actually works with our film. And the song at the end is there to act as this memory trigger for everything that you've had in your previous 2.5, 3, 4, 5 hours of sitting through the film.
You already mentioned concerts too. I assume as a composer it's incredibly nice to have your music live performed. Can you both maybe elaborate a little bit on the community coming there? Because when you already have lots of experience organizing the concerts, Filmfest Ghent was mainly a film festival in the beginning.
It started in '74. It was organized for the first time and really wanted to bring non-distributed films to show in Belgium. And then mid-'80s, there was this other organization in Ghent, which is the Festival of Flanders, that wanted to do a screening of a film, a silent film, with music by Shostakovich. And so they reached out to us and asked, well, how do we project a film? And so that's where we came in, and that was really our first experiences and where the idea came from, to invite composers to come to the festival and to promote the films that we present at the festival. And so from there on we started with a competition focusing on the impact of music on film, in which we have 12 to 15 films. We still have it. We had but we also were very lucky that we had these composers that were also always very solitary in their composing rooms, and we offered them the red carpet for the run, and so very early on we were able to attract people like Georges Delrue, Elmer Bernstein, Ennio Morricone came to Ghent, and then in 2000 we did really a big thing which was a bit crazy for the festival, because we're in a small city, small festival. But we did the first ever Hans Zimmer concert with a big symphonic orchestra, with an additional jazz orchestra, with an African band, with solo singers. Lisa Gerard was there. And that was really the point where a lot of people, I don't know if you were there, Ray, at the first, in 2000. I think it was a bit later you came on board, huh? Yeah. But some of the Americans that were there were a bit surprised that this small festival in Ghent was able to pull this off, and that's where, from these talks, the idea came to organize a World Soundtrack Academy, to bring together composers from all over the world, people involved in film music, and have them each year vote for Composer of the Year, Television Composer of the Year. And as part of this award ceremony, there's also music being played. And we also have a lot of panels and talks and masterclasses with the composers that attend the festival. Yeah.
We have two small videos that we can possibly play one after the other. The first one is from an Avatar concert, a very short 1-minute summary of Simon's music, and then the after movie of the World Soundtrack Awards last year. Yeah.
Yes.
a film composer never sees his audience, never knows who they are. And it is so gratifying to see that there are people who really have heard your music and appreciate it.
Des grandes émotions, surtout pour qui aime le cinéma et la musique. La musique qui voyage avec le cinéma.
When I was sitting in the crowd and the orchestra was playing all this like game music and it was so beautiful, and some of the world's best composers sitting in the crowd, it was fantastic. It was beautiful. Yeah, world class.
There was a huge variety of like very different music that was played, and I think it's important for also upcoming composers that they know, oh, you can write music like that, but you can also do music like that.
I went to a couple of the panels today, which were really great, and I do think you always pick up new little nuggets of wisdom or information when you go and sit and listen to people talk. So often in our work we're just completely isolated, and it's very rare to actually be able to meet other composers and talk with them.
What's most important is there's just so many great people in this industry and that I get to meet through this WSA. I just am thankful to even be here and be a part of such a cool industry.
I think we can.
Am I allowed to say something?
Yeah, sure.
Well, first I want to congratulate. You know, I know it's an incredible, fantastic festival. So hats off to you, sir. But as I'm watching this, I also see immediately the shit that I'm getting myself into with the way that I make music, because the music that I make is like everything is mangled with software and computers, and the music is predominantly super loud. And at a certain point, I was talked to do one of the bigger festivals in the world. Not a crossover festival. I'm not going to mention the name. I might get in trouble. But they wanted to perform like the full Mad Max score to picture. And so I said first, when I was done with the score, George kept editing for another like 7, 8, 9 months. And since my score is so complex in nature, it would take forever, you know, to even make that work with the picture. I would have to hire 2, 3 assistants, probably for 8 months to 12 months, to prep all that on forehand. And then let's talk about the concert itself. What I wanted was the whole orchestra was basically being made up like the War Boys, so everybody was like, you know, just like white with everything. I wanted 20 drummers on stage. I wanted an electric guitar player, a massive PA system to make it as loud as possible. Because when I see that in a room with all these wonderful players, I wouldn't even. I mean, there's a few pieces of my work that can be performed like that, but you would need like a massive PA system. Now, Hans has experimented obviously with that, after we worked for 2-3 years together, we also became really good friends. And he said, "Oh, you should really join me, you know, like this tour thing is like really a lot of fun." And I said, "Are you fucking crazy? I toured for like 30 years in a row. Like, I'm, you know, you go, you have fun, you know." And he was really like a young kid in the candy store, you know, because of that. But yeah, I would at some point I would love to do it to perform stuff live, but it's just very, very complex in its prepping. And,
yeah, I think it's really an aspect that a lot of people underestimate how much.
Definitely, if it's live to picture.
But Simon can help you do that.
I'm at the moment prepping Avatar 1 for the end of this year, and then Avatar 2 next year, and then I'll have Avatar 3 ready the year after, and so on for tour. And yes, it's extremely complicated because also we have this thing that you think that the music that you hear on screen is this beautiful thing that has been placed together. I did the Titanic live show, and there were points where Jim just cut 5 different cues together and just made them into one piece, like the opening of the thing. So you then have to somehow make 5 different layered pieces of music able to be played by an orchestra. and that can be complex. On Avatar, there's a huge amount of the non-orchestral side of things because, you know, I have all this electronic percussion. Because Tom and I both come from programming. You know, that was my day job, was I was working for other composers and producing records. And so I come from that whole thing of electronica as being an essential part of my score. And so you have to work out what can you play live and what can't you, and so on. And that's an essential part. But the good thing is, and why it's so much fun, is that the best part of our job is when we stand up and wave like demented gibbons on the stand, and the orchestra, these amazing musicians, you know, bring our music to life. And because there is something visceral about having 100 people play and you listen to the music, that's the only time we actually get an audience to understand what it felt like for us, is when there is a live performance. And that's why it's so much fun, because often you also get this thing where when you go to those concerts where there is when you go and see E.T. live or whatever, and the orchestra is actually in front of the screen. So you get a chance to actually focus on the music in a way that doesn't happen normally. And I think that's the joy of it. But going back to your title, which is selling a film through the score, tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of times many people will listen to the music than ever see the film in the theatre. And I think to ignore that as part of your marketing and ignore that as part of what you do to sell your film is ridiculously stupid.
Good point, yeah. WEM, as a film festival that decided to focus on film music, could you maybe explain how your film audiences and music audiences, we just spoke about film music audience attending concerts, but there's also a huge industry, networking events, masterclasses, huge educational program.
The music events used to be at the end of our festival, and for this year onwards we will probably move it more within the festival, because we are a film festival and we often hear from composers attending the festival, well, you know, if we go to these events we always meet the same people and the same composers, and also we hear a lot of composers complaining about directors and directors complaining about composers. They speak sometimes different languages, apparently. And so what we, as a film festival, hopefully would be able to do, especially with young people, we have this program which is called the Composers Lab, where we bring young filmmakers and young composers together, and we have them attend all these music events that we do, so that the director also has a better idea of the métier of a composer, and vice versa, also a composer sometimes. Hopefully we can then convince producers and directors to attract the composers as soon as possible with their projects, and not have too much temp music and telling the composer, I want something like this.
We've never seen that before. That's never happened to any of us. I think the other thing I would say is that there is this point where sometimes filmmakers, I mean directors and producers, look at us as if we're in a cage. You know, we are the animals in the zoo that you poke and you look at this strange person that's making the music. And I think anything that can help that transition between the discussion. I have, with certain directors, I know that they may not be able to talk to me in musical terms, but they can tell me what they want in terms of, there'll be something else. One of them, for instance, chops my music up in the Avid, which is not great for the music. And then you have to do this translation, which is how do I then turn it back into a music? Because the director is attempting to tell me the story of what they want. And part of 90% of our job is psychology. The writing the music is the easy bit, and the constructing of the sounds is the fun bit. Where you sit there and we create things. Tom making stuff out of engines and enormous drums and so on. I'll sit there with a whale specialist from the Scripps Institute trying to work out how whales make noise through the sound bladders. We're doing stupid things like that, and that's the fun stuff. But the psychology is actually what we get paid for.
Absolutely. When I talk about it a lot in my educational videos and also master classes that I've been given, where young film composers think that being a film composer is all about music. I said no. Music comes last, and if anything. Writing great music is like a given, that doesn't even need to be discussed. So for me, like you said, you're psychologists. You have to walk a very fine line between what the studio wants, what the producers want, what the director wants. I've been working on movies. By the time I got in, everybody was angry with each other and nobody wanted to talk to each other, and I was like smack right in the middle, being like the translation. It was like, oh, I just talked to the producer and he wants this and this and this, saying to the director, you have to be a great manager of your time and the manager of other people's time. You need to manage expectations with the studio and with the director, and then very last, you need to come up with something great for a film. And yeah, I really love this profession. I've been an artist for the majority of my life since I was 16, and eventually moved into film scoring because it was a world where we're talking about like selling the film through score, but a movie is where 10 different types of people come together, all at the top of their game, from set designer, costume designs, the actors, the director, the cameraman, the lighting, the visual effects guys, the guys that do the sound effects, the mixing of the film eventually. All these people are at the top of their game, and for me, that was the attraction of working in film and being behind the curtain instead of like in front of the curtain and just like getting the applause every night. And I say also to other people, it's like, if you want to be a film composer and you expect to be a rock star, you picked a wrong profession, because 99.9%, like Simon was saying, it's like you're staring at a screen alone in your room trying to figure it out. And people think that I hang out with all the actors like all the time, and it's like the majority of them I don't even fucking know, just like. And
but I would say that I have the opposite experience actually on Avatar, where there is this family. So now, in theory, I've got another 8 years to go in the journey, on and off. I get to do other things as well, but there was an idea that I would go down to the set, and so I go drinking with the stunt team and the visual effects people and the production designers. I got to design instruments. I would sketch out the instruments, then give it to the production designer, who would then 3D print it for me. And that's where you hope it's going to be, is that idea of collaboration from early on. And if there are any filmmakers in here, bringing your composer in early, and so that they actually become part of that family, is, I think, an essential part of a good score. Because part of this is also that there is sometimes this thing where you get these 2-week scores that we've both been part of at the end. Somebody's got fired, whatever else, and so on. And I always think that does a disservice to your film. Your film you've spent years making this film, and suddenly you decide that you're going to spend 2 weeks on the music at the end. The music is so essential to the heart of this film that it also takes time for somebody to assimilate a score, the actual themes and the music. One of my music editors used to call this the allergic reaction, which is that initially you may have a temp score, which you've lived with for a while, and then suddenly something else happens, and there's this new theme and this new music, and there is this allergic reaction to it because it's something new. Your body is not quite ready. You have to get over that allergic reaction, and that, I think, that takes time. That takes that point where you have initial, I hate it. Why aren't you playing that thing I hated 6 weeks ago? At this point, and so on. And that takes that allowing the composer their freedom to actually give you something new.
So I totally agree with that. And the directors that I work with, I have been working over and over and over again. So it means that I talked with George about Furiosa like in 2014. And so a very interesting detail of that is like, and that's how far ahead he thinks, is that when Charlize Theron was casted, she had to act out the scene, which is the very last scene of Furiosa. So the script was like already in his head, and the dialogue was already in his head 20 years ago. And so that is really great. But what is really interesting, and since this, we're talking about marketing, what's very interesting, what Simon was saying, is family. So with George, I'm part of this family, with Zack Schneider and a few other directors. And with this family, you finish a film. And then out of the sudden, it's taken out of your hands, and it goes to a marketing department of a film studio that you don't even know. You never even met these people. Yeah. And that's a very interesting. It goes like poof to the other side, and then everybody that worked within that family structure on the film is completely out of the picture.
And I think that's one of the things that you as filmmakers can do, that is to bring the marketing people into the score earlier as well, because we have access to so many more people than the people in the cinema, in a way that I think people forget about the fact that if you can have 600, 700, 800 million people listening to your music, that's so many more than going to the cinema.
Absolutely. I mean, and on top of that, like, for instance, I have on average 3 million people every month that listen to my score music on Spotify. And so if you count that in a year, that's way more people that actually go to the theater to see the film.
Yeah. And you can also do this. It's so cheap. It's the cheapest way of marketing your film.
You'll live. Yeah. You'll survive. You'll survive.
And we were talking about, there are stupid things. With Jim, I've got, and having a long-term vision is important. So I've got Easter eggs I placed in Avatar 2 that don't pay off until Avatar 5. And it's in the script. He wrote these things in the score, in the music, and you can see, there were things he wrote, and this is where a filmmaker can also make a difference, because if they actually give you those seeds, then that's great. There is, on the first paragraph of Way of Water, it says Neytiri sings the song chord. So I had to write the song chord, and you go through that. And I'm sure with George, it's a similar thing where you get filmmakers for whom they understand that there is more to sound to your ears. There's always this thing that the sense that you are most connected with is smell, that thing. But the one that comes after that is music. And that to discount the best sense of memory that you can get from using music is, again, I think, a ludicrous waste of such a connection that you can use.
And you know what, can I say one thing? In terms of the marketing, I'm brought on by virtually all the big studios. They have huge teams doing it. And so many of them really don't understand the music or how to even explain it to press people, and I'm happy I have my career, and I grew up with my father playing piano every night. We had a piano at the house, and I've taken every lesson, but I've also loved music and film, and and getting to know composers, and the thing is, yeah, the marketing's important. It's important that the people know how to market it. It's like there's a car salesman out there who knows everything. Like a car salesman who knows everything about a car, as opposed to the one who goes, "Look how beautiful, shiny it is." So
there's a man who's been wanting to ask a question over there for a long time.
Wait. I have a mic.
I love the suit jacket, by the way.
Thank you very much. I want to say that this is the most coherent thing I've heard. My father started James Bond. My name is Stephen Saltzman, Harry Saltzman, and I think those Bond films have really demonstrated what you said. Everyone remembers the songs. The songs are more important sometimes than the actual plots of the films. Everyone in the room can sing and hum a Bond theme or a song. And I think what you do is vital. And if we don't support what you do musically, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I believe scoring is key to raising the tension, doing everything. Listen,
If you next time you ever watch a Bond movie, any time Bond is doing well, you hear the moral, you hear the theme. It's triumphant, and it's your work, and I applaud you. And I want everyone here to thank these people because what they do is save our industry. That's what I think.
Another question?
Yes, hi. I was waiting for the question time, but I understand that you've opened the floor. So I thank you for organizing this, but there is something I miss. I miss Diane Warren. I miss German Franco. I miss Laura Cartman. I miss Celia Montes.
When you say you miss them, what do you mean? Diane Warren has 14 Oscar nominations. I worked with her on the Governor's Award.
But this is my point precisely. So I don't know if everybody's aware, but women represent 3% of the music from film and 5% of the music showcased in cultural centers. So we have launched an initiative called Global Women in Music. We are holding a concert, an annual concert in New York, showcasing 8 women composers, directed, so with an orchestra, directed by a female conductor. Some people leave the room saying, I didn't know there was a woman composer in this country and this country. I've never seen a live concert directed by a female conductor. So I don't want to be controversial. I'm just saying that I wish that these women also get the opportunity to be showcased. We are not coming from the music industry nor from the film industry. We have produced a documentary about the initiative, and I wish that next year they can.
But you know what? Can I tell you one thing? I do a panel at Comic-Con in San Diego. It's called Musical Anatomy of a Superhero. He's been on it, and 3 years ago, somebody said, hey, how come there's no women on this panel, right? And I said, more women need to be doing superhero movies. A year later, I had Laura Cartman, I had Natalie Holt, and I had...
Good.
God, and she's a client of mine.
That's the problem. Yeah, nobody remembers them.
Also, it happens to me with everybody I have.
No problem.
So anyway, it's definitely growing so much. And a lot of times it's hard to get people out there. Hildur Gudendaughter was invited to get the big award at the Palm Springs Film Festival, but she couldn't come out.
I would be more than happy to collaborate. That's my word.
I would like to respond to what you just said. I think you're raising a very important point. What I would like to add to that is that I've been involved in education since the 2000s. My mom was a music teacher, so like as I was growing up, education was like part of my upbringing, and she constantly worked on that and focused on it. It was her life work. So I started working on music universities, and I set up a course for myself. And now I'm getting to the point, is that I strongly believe, because I've been part of education for more than 20 years, that the problem why there's a lack of a lot of female composers, it starts when they're already 6 years old. You know, they're taught by their families, you shouldn't go in music, or you should do something else. By the time I get to deal with them when they're 18 and they're now moving in music university, and they show an extraordinary talent to be very, very good at this, and then they decide, I don't want to be a film composer. I decided to do singer-songwriting, or I decided to play piano. And I wish that, to quote, like, it's almost too stupid for words, but it makes sense, like what Wonder Woman is saying at a certain point. You know, if you really want to go for something, you can go at it, and you can go for it. And what I noticed in education, that especially young girls are demotivated to get into this industry. And I feel that's why, if you look at the orchestras, in Amsterdam, we have one of the best orchestras in the world, and 65% of them are women, and not men, because they pick that profession over being a composer.
May I respond to that? We work with hundreds of composers from around the world. They're just waiting for an opportunity.
Well, and just so you know, there's Laura Cartman helped start the...
No, he's taking this as an aggression. I don't mean to aggress you. I'm just raising a problem, and we need to fix it. I'm here to fix it if you want. Please join me in this effort. Thank you.
Absolutely. And just so you know, the Alliance of Women Film Composers, Laura Cartman, started it 3 years ago. There's over 600 members there. I'm supportive. I'm a sponsor of that organization as well.
Good. Yeah.
And and there's so many more opportunities. I did a panel at the Middleburg Film Festival, women in film music, and I had 6 of the top composers, including Diane Warren, who's a client of mine and a dear friend. So it is getting better. It's slowly, but it is definitely improving.
And also, half of my assistants are female, and I know of 2 of them. You will hear something very interesting, like in the future.
She put the panel together. Talk to that woman.
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to thank you very much for this panel. It's absolutely wonderful. I wanted to ask you a quick question about another controversial debate, but regarding the artificial intelligence. I wanted to ask you today, as an artist but also author, if you think that artificial intelligence represents more a threat or an opportunity or a tool for you, with respect, of course, about the future of film composer, but also for the entertainment industry in general.
I'm a massive fan of technology. I've always embraced newest forms of technology. AI is definitely like a scary world to move forward in, but yet again we can't stop it. So you have to embrace it and try to make it work for yourself. As scary as it is, closing your eyes and looking the other way, it's going to move on and it's going to continue.
I've done a couple of panels on AI systems, and I'm involved in technology on this. My concern is that not that AI, the AI developers telling us that they'll be better composers than us. Great. The problem is not that this is to the 909. If you have 1 million monkeys, there may be Hamlet, but there's also 999 pieces of shit. And the problem is that the 999,990 pieces of shit submerge Hamlet, and so you have situations like Spotify where an AI system doubled the number of tracks on Spotify in 1 month. That makes it harder to actually find great stuff, and that's my problem with AI systems. Not that they're not there to support the artist, but they will submerge the artist in this level of grey. And my problem is the greying out of creativity, not that AI systems shouldn't be there.
We have to wrap up. Sorry. We have to wrap up because the room needs to be cleared. I understood. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your insights. And have a great festival.
Thank you.